Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Zander Sprague.
Hello, Epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Zander Sprague, and today I am so honored to be joined by John Diggs. John, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm John Diggs. I'm known as the world's Mapineering mentor. Originally from Los Angeles, just a quick story. I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, went to Washington State University, go Cougs. Got a chance to play several years of professional football until that ended. Got into the mortgage industry in Los Angeles, built one of the largest mortgage companies in Southern California in the early 2000s. Then abruptly lost everything in a mortgage meltdown and the Great Recession. I mean, going from successful football to successful businessman to homeless was a very dramatic experience where I literally lost everything, just career, business, family, wife, everything was gone. And I was forced to go back to my mother's house and reset myself. And one of the things that I took with me to reset, well, I took my mountain bike, gym clothes, and a big box that was full of motivational tapes and CDs and books that I've accumulated over the years. And so I started digging through that box. The one book stood out to me, and it was called the Mind Map book by Tony Buzan. Read it from cover to cover. It changed my perspective and caused me to make a decision to mind map everything that was in that box. What mind mapping has done was truly remarkable because it enabled me to go from broke living at my mother's house to making a nice figure income living on the beach in Marina del Rey, California within 8 months. And it was all because of what mind mapping, how it just transformed my life in so many different ways. And since 2020, when we had the pandemic, well, before then I was, mind mapping caused me to really reset my life and do some incredible things in my life, travel the world and social dance with my kids and do a lot of awesome things. And when 2020 came, I decided to start writing books and sharing the power of mind mapping with the world. And since then, I've written 10 books. I've become an international best-selling author. I did a TEDx talk that tells more about my story and this mind mapping journey. And now I'm just very passionate about just helping people love and live their best lives by sharing everything that I've learned about what I call the most powerful thinking tool in the universe, which is mind maps.
Absolutely. And I want to get into mind mapping in just a moment. But as you know, I'm all about the epic journeys that we've taken and that we're on and the ones that we want to take. Right. But pretty cool that you got to play professional football.
I did.
And so I wanted to just take a moment and, if you don't mind, indulge me and talk a little about, you playing professional football. Like, what is that like to be on the field in a stadium of, I'm going to guess people are cheering you. I mean, that's,
Wow. Yeah, man. It's a great question. And as a child, my dream was actually to play college football, not pro football.
Sure.
And I think it was because when I was young, my dad took me to like a Cleveland Brown, Los Angeles Rams game. I was like 10 years old and it was hot, it was boring, and it was a terrible game. Then like 2 weeks later, I went to the USC UCLA football game and it was all this energy. And so as a kid, I visualized myself actually playing college football. And there's a story I'll share real fast. I was my junior year at Washington State. We were playing against Stanford. It was on national TV back in the 80s when every game wasn't on TV. So it was like a really big deal to be on TV. And I remember being in our tunnel, getting ready to run out onto the field, and I'm just ready to play. I think my dad was in the stands, so I'm ready. And as I started running out and hearing the band and the crowds cheering, I looked around and I literally just started bawling. I was just crying, tears coming down my face. I stopped, and well, all my teammates and everybody was running by me, and I stopped and cried and looked around, because that was the first realization that I actually was living the dream of what I had as a kid all of those days. Just to
Absolutely.
play in that circumstance. It was really mind blowing and for me. And I had several experiences like that as a college player. By the time I got to the pros, it was a different experience because it was no longer going to practice. You were now going to work.
Yeah.
And the fun of the game was kind of taken out of it for me. And even though I played 5 years, I actually played with the Raiders. We talked about that earlier. Their last 2 years in Los Angeles, and I played up in Canada for 3 years, but it wasn't the same kind of, experience.
Absolutely. It
It
is,
was,
look, it is
yeah.
a business. My
Mhm.
understanding is there are obviously a lot of rules.
Right.
They're paying you money,
A lot of high
and
expectation.
the
Expectation is
expectation of here's how you're going to act,
right.
here's you can't do this, even though
Yes.
you're like, hey, hey John, let's go play some pickup basketball. No, I can't do that.
Can't do that. Can't
And
do that. So it took the fun away.
I was fortunate. My first job out of college, I worked at a front desk of a hotel in San Francisco, and we
Mhm.
had lots of National League baseball teams stay with us, and eventually we had American League baseball teams. But they would come in a couple of times a year to play the San Francisco Giants, and um, so I worked there for um, 2 years. So I got to
Nice.
know some of the people that came in, and some were really nice and some weren't as nice. But I had a moment to, talk to some of them. And what was amazing is this is like people like David Justice and
Mm. One of my favorites.
people
Yeah.
from the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah.
He's the only one I can pull, but there was
McGriff.
that early that
You know,
like early '90s
Maddox
Braves
was on that
where
team
they
too.
were
I think
people that we anyway. My point
Smoltz.
was
It was a good team. That was a good team.
it was a good team. But I asked them, like, what is it like to play professional baseball? And what was funny is almost to the person, they
Mhm.
said, I can't believe I get paid. I would pay
Right.
to play. I love the game this much.
Right.
I
Right.
asked them, I go, what about the 160 odd games?
Mhm.
Doesn't that get boring? They're like, I love it. I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that I get paid to play this, and they're
It's
like, I
incredible.
would go, David Justice is like, I would go play in a dirt lot, in a sand lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I just love the game so much. And I get it's, obviously he's putting a good thing. I'm sure for you, part of it was look at this. I'm getting paid to play football. I love it. But yes,
Yeah.
it's not all sunshine and daisies and roses.
No, it's not. And I was, by the grace of God, made a good decision to actually get my California real estate license. So I actually had like listings on the market while I was playing with the Raiders in LA. So I
Right.
kind of knew I knew I was going to be doing some things after football afterwards, which was a good thing for me because it was easy for me to parlay when my career was over versus some of these other athletes who struggle trying to find their new way.
Yeah. Definitely. And moving a little further down your
Mhm.
life road, you mentioned that you had a really successful mortgage business.
I did.
2008 comes
Yeah.
uh, to say that the bottom dropped out. So in my book, I talk about epic unexpected, those
Yeah.
things that happen in our life that
Yeah.
are you're like, now what do I do? And clearly, boy, your story is
That was a big one for me.
that was huge.
The mortgage industry was out of control in the early 2000s, and I was a part of that experience of making tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars a month as a owning my company, and not really having the foresight of what could possibly happen. Yeah, you throwing money around. I was doing a lot of crazy stuff, and life was great. I mean, it was fabulous. Then one day, one of my sales reps called me, and I was talking to him. I was like, yeah, we got those loans that are funding right today. And he was like, well, yeah, I'm on my way to the office to fund those loans and probably $30,000-$40,000 worth of business. And he called me like 2 hours later and said he just got off a national call with his company, and the owner of the company said, effective immediately, we are no longer in business.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the end, where companies just started dominoing like that, which having $30,000-$40,000 of monthly expenses with 90% of your income gone. Yeah,
Absolutely. And it's those things that sometimes when we look back
mm-hmm.
are the places that we grow the most, where we learn
Absolutely.
the most about ourselves. Um, I like Daniel
Absolutely.
Coyle's The Talent Code.
Mm.
Um, Great book. If you haven't read it,
Mm-hmm.
I suggest people, it's great. And basically, what he's saying is it kind of goes along in order to master something, you need 10,000 hours. But more importantly, when we're trying to learn something new, we learn the most when we struggle versus just having it come easy. And the
Yeah.
more you struggle, the more myelin you build to make
Mm-hmm.
whatever you're doing easier. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I like to sort of break it down for people. And John, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. If you think back to when you were in kindergarten or first grade, you're learning how to write.
Yeah.
I mean, it took all kinds of effort to learn how to write an A, a B, a C, a
Yeah.
S, a
Yeah.
Z, any of those. And now there's really no conscious part of how do I
Right.
make an A or whatever. Why? Because
Exactly.
you built that super highway of how to do it. Playing football, at first, trying to catch a football or block someone or whatever, took a
Yeah.
lot of thinking.
Extremely hard.
Driving. Think about driving. Remember
Mm-hmm.
when you first got your license? I know I did. I was exhausted
Yeah.
because I was concentrating so hard in stuff.
Right. Right.
Now,
Yeah. It's
I,
unconscious.
it is riding
Yeah.
a bike. You think
Mm-hmm.
about when you first ride a bike and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm how do I brake? And
Right.
and all of that. But the struggle, we struggled to learn how to do it. And therefore, if you just got on a bike and just instantly knew how to ride it,
Right.
you probably wouldn't be as good a bike rider.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So,
I totally
um,
agree.
tell me a little about mind mapping. What is it? How do we do it? And what do you teach people?
Yeah, great question. See, when I was, jaded and homeless and going through that, and started mind mapping the contents of those books like Think and Grow Rich, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Unlimited Power, all of the big self-help books that
Yeah.
I collected. Mind mapping was really my first introduction to visual thinking, meaning that a mind map is essentially a way to take everything that you're thinking and actually put it in a structured format so you actually can see things.
Yeah.
So when I started mind mapping the contents of those books and actually starting to see information that Tony Robbins and Eckhart Tolle and all these people were saying, it created a couple of things: that active learning, to where I was really engaged with what I was learning versus just passive learning, reading things and underlining things, but it really not connecting to me in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Where mind mapping caused me to really kind of go deep as I was reading. I was thinking about, all right, what is the true subject matter of this paragraph or chapter that I can extract the keywords and phrases and put it on my mind map. Did not know that this was really impacting me on a deeper level than ever before, because I really started to understand things. So, once that happened, I started developing what is called after that process of 4 months of going through that big ass box, I realized two big things from them thought leaders. The first thing is that ultimately that life is meant to be loved. All of them were basically talking about the purpose of life is strictly to love it, and they all had their various perspectives and strategies and systems
Mm-hmm.
of thought on how to do it. But then another common thing that mind mapping allowed me to see amongst these leaders was that in order to truly love life, you have to really get clear on who you are and what you want from life.
Yeah.
So after those first 4 months of going through that box, I spent the next 4 months of developing what is now known as like my I am mind map, where I just created I took a piece of paper. In the middle, I put I am, and I started really deeply thinking about what are the key components of who I am and what I want my life to be about.
Absolutely.
And that really transformed me in such a way where I consciously decided now who I am and what my core values, what my core beliefs are, and what my life is going to be about, which empowered me to start thinking differently, feeling differently, behaving differently, which I truly believe was the way I attracted that six-figure job,
Mm-hmm.
and obtain that six-figure job, because I was a completely different person from when I first moved into my mom's to going through this mind mapping process. I was absolutely clear and certain about who I am and what I wanted, which again, just the universe works in ways that when you get clear about anything and you're visualizing yourself successfully being, doing, and having what you want, seems like these opportunities just start coming in your life. And that's what I've been practicing since 2010, when this all had 2009, when this all happened, all the way up to today. And essentially, this is what I am very passionate about, showing people on how to create their own I am mind map to get really clear about who they are, not what society says, not what their
Right.
title is, not what their job is, but what is your core beliefs, your core values, and what is your life about? It's very powerful, Xander, when people can see it. They can think it here, but actually see it is a
Ab-
total different game.
Absolutely. And that goes along with stuff I talk about in my book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that like I just did my vision board for 2025. That's a little mind mapping. Hey,
Yeah, yeah,
what
it
do I
is.
want? Let me see it
Mm-hmm.
every day to remind myself that I want that.
Yes.
There's something to be said about as we get older, write it down,
Yeah.
right? The process of writing it down
Mm-hmm.
helps us to remember, not just, oh, yeah, I need to remember to call John. I write out, call
Right.
John. Now I'm much more likely to do it. You talk about the I am and putting all these things. I try and remind people all the time that we are multifaceted.
Yeah.
A-
Levels.
as a mental health professional, I'm like, we are not just one thing. We are not just are if you have anxiety, you're not just anxiety.
Mm-mm.
You're, um, uh, I'm a son, I'm a father,
Right.
I'm a brother, I'm an
Mhm.
uncle, I'm a boyfriend, I'm a best friend, I'm a friend, I'm a speaker. I'm not just one thing. And I
Right.
think you're right. You're not just your title, right?
Right. Right.
and and that idea of doing that and sort of my take on it is reminding people that they have choice in their life, and choice is so powerful.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, and you're a great example, there you are in your mom's house on the couch, you had a choice. Now your choices were perhaps crap and crappier.
Right,
uh,
right, right, right. Exactly.
Okay. I mean, and that does happen. Sometimes our choice is we wish we had a third choice. We wish we
Hmm.
had something better, but we don't.
Right,
But there is so much power in saying, I am consciously choosing this. It's not, I acknowledge it's not what I want,
right.
but I'm choosing versus because life is a participatory sport, folks.
It is.
If you don't participate today, your life is actually still going on.
Right.
If you
Yeah.
choose not to participate today, you're still going to be a day older. Things are still going to happen. But when you are making choices, there's so much power. And I think that's what we're both saying together is the power of understanding and that clarity of
Hmm.
where I would like to get. Look, sometimes we set a destination and we don't make it.
Right.
That happens. But at least I tried.
Yeah, exactly. And how I like to think about it is and share with folks is that I believe out of all God's creations, he blessed us as humans with the one distinction, and that's the power of choice, the
Mm-hmm.
power to decide. We can decide how we experience our lives where other living beings don't necessarily have that conscious choice. A lot of people forget that, and those that know it don't realize that a lot of that choice must start with thought, choosing what you want to think about or what you want to focus on is very powerful to determine how you feel, which your feelings will determine your behavior. So I like to tell people a lot, you got to get clear on choosing the right thoughts to have the experience that you want to have to love and live your best life. And mind mapping
Absolutely.
helps clarify what it is you should be thinking about, when you should be thinking about it most of the time, to attract that what you want to experience.
Absolutely. And I years ago was reading a book, and it was talking about Buddhism and business and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
um, it's funny how you could read a 200 or 300 page book, and there's just one concept that you walk away with, and the
Right.
rest of it you're like, yeah, it was good, but I can't tell you. But what I walked away was, in Buddhism, there's this concept, and I like this, that things are not inherently good or bad. It's how we as human beings interpret it. So
Yep.
let me take something that's very relevant right now. I'm going to date this podcast, but that's okay. It's raining here in Northern California. It's also raining down in LA. Some people may see the rain as a really great thing, and other people are like, no, it's a bad thing because there's going to be mudslides and there were all those
Right.
horrible fires. The fact of the matter is, what you think about the rain in and of itself is not good or bad. It
Right.
just is.
Yeah.
Maybe I think it's really great. Oh, it's going to help extinguish all the hot spots, and we need the rain for the water table and all of that. I might have the thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible because now there's going to be, washouts and stuff.
Right.
Both of these are true. Both of
Yep.
them are, it's not that one is more true than the other. It's just, how do I interpret what's happening? The sun is out. It's a great thing. If I'm a farmer and there's a drought, it's not a good thing.
What do you make things mean? It determines
Exactly.
your life. And one of my mentors told me something that was very poignant that I'll share real quick is, he was saying that, John, do you realize everyone on the planet has two different perceptions of what reality is?
Yeah.
Not all people see reality the same way. He said, even if they're Siamese twins conjoined at the head, there's two
Yeah.
different perceptions of reality. And I remember he asked me, like, how many people are on the planet? And I was like, 7, 8 billion. And it was just ironic that he just went down to the actual number,
Mm-hmm.
7.9.3, whatever
Yeah.
he said. Then he said, so that's almost 8 billion different perceptions of what reality is. You understand that?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And he said, well, if that is true, how can anyone have the audacity to argue that their one perception is the right one?
Yeah.
And that was just an aha moment to me, to realize that I since then I no longer fight to be right.
Yeah.
I'm always open. It's like, what, you could be right. You could be right. I don't think you are, but you could be.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to argue with you about, you're entitled to your perception.
Right. And I was a history major in college,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned. I was like, wow, it changed the way I thought about history, which was that you and I could both witness the same historical event
Right.
and have two different perspectives of what happened,
What occurred.
what occurred. If you write it down and it gets published, later generations go, oh, well, this is how this happened.
Right.
But no, history, the way that we read it
That was his
and stuff,
perception on how it happened.
is one person's interpretation or their experience of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And although they're not lying about it, they're your own bias, your own perception, but we take it as that's how this happened.
Right.
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 And there's all kinds of stuff. There was a lot of controversy in the
That happens a lot with religion. That's how it happened, with the 1400, 2000 years ago,
And how do we know?
Right.
How do we know?
Right, right,
Right.
right, right. So that happens a lot,
Right.
that I totally agree with that point. But that's one thing that I really hope that, again, my mind mapping message really helps people do, is clarify their thoughts and what they're making things mean.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of work with people in this area, especially with completing things in their past, where we would put that out on a mind map, and I'd actually ask them some questions. What else could this mean? What else could this mean? What else could it mean? What else could that mean? What else could this mean? And it really kind of unlocks that tension that they may have had with something in the past, realizing that it could have meant a whole bunch of different things other than what they were making it mean, that was
Right.
causing them to feel miserable in the present, right?
Absolutely, and I'm going to do two sort of non sequitur things, but they do tie in here, John. One is in my work as a mental health provider, I'm a big proponent that what brings people into therapy a lot of the time is that they need closure on something.
Yeah.
There's the Gestalt theory of closure that Gestalt was a psychologist, and he did this experiment with 10 circles and asked people how many were complete circles. And it turns out there's only one, but there's like four that are really, really close. And in our mind's eye, because we want completeness, we see it as being closed. So, and I think for people talking about their past, sometimes they're stuck on something because they don't have closure. Once they have closure, they're able to move on
Right.
with their
Release and
life.
let go. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say is what I call my green grass analogy.
Okay.
You and I are neighbors. I look over at your lawn. It's beautiful, lush, and green. Oh my gosh, John's lawn is so green. I'm so envious. You look out and go, wow, there's a lot of dog poop on that lawn.
Right.
Yeah, it's green, but there's a whole lot of there's something fertilizing my lawn, and I'm not happy, right?
Right.
Same green lawn, perception of
Perception.
of what it is. We as people tend to be the meanest person in our own life.
Yeah.
Right. You and I were joking about our fabulous pates, our beautiful bald heads.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Right.
You and I embrace that.
Yeah.
Other people are like, oh my God, I can't believe I lost my head.
Hate it. Yeah. It's funny you said that, because my dad used to tell me, he said, son, the grass may be greener on the other side, but it's just as hard to mow. So,
Yeah.
So that always rang true with me.
Right. And we don't know what's going on with someone else. We don't know the things that one person sees and says, oh, wow, that person is, they have a beautiful bald head. Look at how beautiful their head is. And I might look at it and go, oh my God, it's so ugly. It's the part of my body I hate. I hate that, or whatever. Right. And it's funny, if we get curious and talk to people,
right,
we find out that maybe the thing we think is so awesome about it is the thing that they're like, oh yeah, I don't like that trait. I don't like that physical quality in me. And then you're like, are you serious?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear that about jokes all the time. Some people think the joke is funny as ever, and everybody else is like, really?
Exactly. I know lots of jokes that I can't tell anymore, but
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things that, again, what I really try to help people see by way of mind mapping is just what they're thinking. And that's one of the powerful things about mind mapping, is being able to take whatever you're thinking about and actually look at it from a third person perception, so you can analyze to see if you're not being flexible enough or having enough empathy or compassion or things in these natures. When you are thinking about things, it's hard to see what you're thinking when it's in here.
Yeah.
I've yet to find a better tool than like a mind map to get it out of here, so you can actually be like, well, wow, this is the decision, all of the perspectives of the decision I need to make, or the problem I'm trying to solve, or the issue I'm faced with.
Absolutely. And it comes down to creating structure, because I am I believe that people like structure.
Yeah.
Structure makes us feel comfortable.
Organized, predictable, accountable, reliable.
Absolutely. Like sort of, if you think back to when you were in high school, were you particularly stressed after the first week of school about how to get from your first period class to your second period class? No. You might be stressed about an exam, but you weren't like, oh my gosh, I don't. The first week, maybe you're having to learn how to get there. But once you learn how to get there, you don't have a lot of stress. When you go to the supermarket, you don't have a lot of stress of how do I get to the supermarket?
Yeah. It just becomes a comfortable experience.
Well, because there's structure. I know I have to go out, take a left here, take a right here, whatever. If we have structure,
Yeah,
I think, and that's where the mind map comes in. It helps to create the structure to be able to see it and go, oh,
it's
now
huge.
I see the steps that I'm doing that aren't working for me.
Yeah, I see connections. I see the bigger picture. I see how it all ties in. I see my next best step. I see the things that I need to focus more on and maybe less on.
Yeah.
That's a lot of the stuff that where I'm just again just passionate about sharing this with the tool, because I find, like you, I'm sure in your experience in career, that so many people are mentally stressed and confused and have a lot of mental angst, and I think it's a lot of because of lack of structure in their thought processing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more and I talk to people about creating structure and how much easier all of a sudden it doesn't need to be difficult.
Mm-mm.
You put some structure in, all of a sudden you understand how to do it. I was doing my internship, I was working with high school students, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of them were having academic challenges. And I came up with this idea of that I used myself for throughout my whole academic career, where I did my homework in the same exact order every single night. And I
Mm-hmm.
started with the thing that I didn't like, my least favorite subject, and went to the one that I liked most.
Yeah,
And the
and it worked.
students that I got to actually use it
Mm-hmm.
reported back to me that homework got easier because they understood what they were doing, when they were going to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that. You as a football player understood that there was structure to uh, your practice.
Yeah, yeah.
So you weren't stressed about like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen. You understood there was probably some warm up, some stretching, and then you go off and you do your thing. All of
Mm-hmm.
that helps people to just mentally feel more
Yeah.
at ease. Yes,
And
there's unpredictable things, obviously, but
the
we're
one
much better equipped if we're like, I feel comfortable because I understood the structure.
Yeah, and one of the key structures that I teach students to for like problem solving or decision making, which it could be a very stressful situation depending on the degree and the
Oh,
level of it.
sure.
It's something called a 5 W's and S mind map process, where you put the title of the problem in the center. Then
Mm-hmm.
around you put who, what, where, when, why, and how,
Mm-hmm.
and you start asking yourself thought-provoking who questions about that problem, who's
Yeah.
involved, who shouldn't be involved, what's occurring, when is it happening, where is it happening, why is it happening, and how can I resolve it. And you ask yourself and brainstorm each one of those subtopics around your central problem theme. And after you go through this exercise, which what I lead a lot of people to do, they step back and the emotional angst that they had is no longer there,
Yeah.
and now they're open because now they see all of the key components of their problems that they never saw when it was just here,
Absolutely.
which gives them structure and a system on how to solve it or make that decision and bring them the peace that they're looking for. That's the 5 W's and H mind map. That's really, really powerful.
And that is really powerful. I like that. Now, John, this is fascinating. How can people find you? How can they do mind mapping?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I'm all over social media, johndiggs.com, but you can go to johndiggs.com and you'll find all of the various mind mapping templates that I offer for free for students, for professionals, for student athletes. I do a lot of work with student athletes,
Right.
helping them mind map and crystallize their vision. But johndiggs.com is the best way. And if anybody has any direct questions or excited about it, you can always email me at john@johndiggs.com, and I like to spend time with folks to really see if what my systems are offering is really valuable for someone. So I normally like to do 15-minute free consultations with folks that are really interested about how mind mapping can impact their lives. So if anybody's interested in that, please just email me. But I'm always available because this is a what I believe is my divine purpose in life, the way it kind of came into my life, the way it's been impacting my life. I truly believe that, I've been chosen to really take leadership and share this powerful tool with the world. So anybody who needs help, I'm always here to try to figure out or show them ways that this mind mapping can help them love and live their best life for sure.
Well, that is awesome. Thank you so much. This has been really a fascinating conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It's got me thinking, John, which is
Yeah.
always a good thing.
That's a good thing. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. I want to remind people that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And as always, remember, epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Zander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Zander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.